I think I hadn't told you before, but we are aiming at building a three-dimensional model that will represent the information that we can get from reading the score. We have already attended one dimension in the first two uh, episodes around the frequency or the note. Now we are on the second dimension when we are talking about the length or the duration of the sounds, and the third part is going to be shared in a couple of weeks. But for the second, we are on the second dimension. So let's get down to the business and let me put on the screen again the beautiful Excel file that we are building together. And continuing, just to give you a quick glance at what we were looking at last week, we started talking about the tempo and how there is a very discretionary range in the number of bits per minute, which we are going to explain next week. So don't get desperate, but this unit of measure BPM, these are the common standards, and we painted in green the one at which the three sources match, the one in yellow when there is a difference either in the minor or the upper limit, and red when they are completely different. So by just a glance, we can see that there is not very good consensus in terms of what actually means each of the tempo. But we also mentioned that the first dimension, the value of the note in terms of frequency or the actual note, whether you're singing a G or a D, is very, very, very objective, while the tempo, the second dimension, is very, very subjective. But inside that subjectivity, and I was also telling you that it looks like we will be talking about math. That's what it looks like. We are talking about math because we have these guys to the right, but we are going to pay attention to this guy, this table here on the left, and the source of this table is here. I was looking for a table that would actually represent easily what I'm trying to explain, because one of the major challenges here is that musicians are usually not very good pedagogues. They are not very good at teaching or passing their understanding or knowledge. So I was looking for something that could actually work. Truth is that I am not 100% happy with this table, but at least I would say an 80%. So what I wanted to mention to you around this chart here that I am zooming in so that you can see it a little better. We are going to be using in not a completely different notation, but I may be using different words for what we are about to read, and I will explain you why. So we are looking at this beautiful circle here, and this beautiful circle here represents what is called a semi-rave. However, the English name actually refers to the UK, but the American name is a whole note. But since we are going to talk about in math, and that will be much easier, you will see how it's going to be the value of 1. So the value of 1 that is called a whole note is we are talking about the value of 1 bar. If you remember when we looked at our friend here called the stave, we said that these vertical lines that cross the stave are called bars. So in Spanish, it's much easier to explain. So each of these bars contains a number of notes, but the note that fits perfectly to the value of 1 is a whole note. So most of the times I will not say whole note, but I said 1. I will say 1. So how many notes of value 1 are there in 1 bar? There is just 1. So it's much easier to understand in mathematical terms. In 1 bar, how many 1 bars, 1 notes, 1 value notes are? There is only 1. That's pretty self-explanatory. If you get confused by this table or any other that you find on the internet, don't be surprised. Many people get. That's why when people start studying solfeggio, uh, they get into trouble. Not very didactical to teach. But let's keep then. We're talking about note value. We're not mentioning the rest value. We go back to this at the end. The second one, it's called a half. So a half, as in mathematics, what is the value of a half? It's a half. So how many halves are in the value of 1? Of course, there are 2. That's what we see here. We have 2 values of half that make 1. That's purely simply mathematics, the easiest way to look at it. This that I was calling a stick, this little stick that comes or that leaves the circle is called a stem. So the value of 1 is just a circle, and its half value, the half note, is the same circle but with a stem. If we continue dividing, and if you are you have already noticed, we are dividing them in multiples of 2, or the divisor it's 2. So the half of 1, 1 half. The half of 1 half, 1 quarter. How are we going to call it? A quarter. Much easier, right? Now, notice that the difference is that the circle here was in the inside was white. The quarter is fully black. So a fully black with a stem, it's a quarter. How many quarters are there in one? Certainly there are 4. And that's why you count 1, 2, 3, and 4, because obviously there are 4 quarters in one. That's where it gets from. But if we continue dividing by 2, then we reach that if you divide the quarter by 2, of course, you're going to get an eighth. How are you going to call it? The easiest way to call it an eighth. How has it evolved? Now we have the same black circle with the stem, and now this beautiful stick coming out of here, it's what gives us the understanding that now we are talking about an eighth. How many eighths are part of the value of 1? Obviously, there are 8. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. So, I think this is if you look at it from a mathematical perspective, it's much easier. So, how many eights in 1? 8. How many quarters in 1? 4. How many halves in 1? 2. Of course, remember that we are talking about the value of these notes, and that it is much easier if we call them as if they were fractions. If we continue dividing the the eighth divided by 2, now we get what is called a semiquiver, but that easily we are going to call it just a 16 notes. Notice that the only change is that we have added another stick, another tail, and now if it has 2 tails, it is a 16th. How many 16ths in 1? Obviously 16. How many of these little boys here make a 1? 16. If you write 16 of this, then you have the same value as this guy here. And so on. We are going to stop at the 30 seconds because even though there is, of course, for music writing for the 64ths, truth is that the human voice cannot reach 64. We will explain that next week. So we are going to stop at the 32, and it has now 3 tails. The solid black circle with a stem and 3 tails is now a 32nd. Because if you divide 16 by 2, of course you get 32. And again, the obvious calculation. How many 32nd notes to make 1? Of course, 32. That's, I think, pretty much self-explanatory. And we're talking about the note value or the time when we have sound. When we have sound, and it can be any height, so it can be da, 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 any note that you want, that is the value. How long is it going to last? This value. a half, a quarter, an eighth, or whatever. At what height? That's the first dimension that we explained earlier. But we have something that is called rest, and this is what I was mentioning with Katia in another program, that it can be contentious because I really don't like the name of rest, because it is not that you are resting the voice or that the instrument is resting, because music is built on silence and sounds. And silence is not a rest of the sound. Silence is a component, is a basic component of sound. That's why I don't like the name rest, because in English it gives us the idea that the instrument or the voice is resting, and that is not what it's actually doing. In Spanish, we call them silence. That's why when you listen to the programs with Katia and I, you notice that I usually call it a pause, which is not really a pause, but it's not. We can also call it a silence, or we can call it a rest. But the meaning is the same. The absence of the mission of the instrument or the voice. And so when we have the duration of the sound, we also have the duration of the silence or the rest, or what I usually like to call the pause. So if we have a symbol like this little guy here, and I think that maybe now I can increase it a little more so that you can see it better. Well, it really didn't improve that much. I think that might work now. So if we say that the whole note value of 1 is this circle, then the equivalent, but in silence, no sound, is this guy here that is like a little solid line below any of the lines of the stave. If it is below, this is the stave, if you can somehow see it, there are here the 5 lines of the stave. Let me go back to our stave. So if we place here in our stave a line just below any of these lines of the stave, below it would mean the silence of 1. If you want the silence of a half, you're going to use the same solid line, but instead of placing it below any of the lines in the stave, you're going to put it in the upper side. If you put it over, then it is the silence of a half. If we continue moving, we also have the silence or the rest of a quarter, and it's this weird symbol that has some sort of waves. So if you draw that symbol, that means that you have the silence of a quarter. So if the sound lasts a quarter, ta, then the silence lasts exactly the same quarter. That would be the explanation. The eighth has this symbol here. This is sound, and this is the absence of sound, the rest of the eighth. For the 16th, we have this guy here. This one is very easy to recognize as well as the eighth, because notice that the eighth has one tail, and its silence is a stick with one tail. The 16th has 2 tails, and the rest, or the pause or the silence, has 2 tails. And the 32nd has 3 tails in sound, and the silence has 3 tails in the stick. So they are very easy to recognize because of that. And you may be asking yourself, how is this complicated? Yes, reading music can be really complicated. Um, and because I want to make it more easy for you to understand, is that we are going to, or I am going to show you now. Let me put on the screen. Pa-da-da-da, there, no, that's not the one. Here it is. We are going to use the examples that we used last week, because I would like you to notice. We are going to start with La Tarantella by Maestro Rossini. Tan, tararararararan, tan, tararararararan, tararararan. Remember that we noticed this number last time when we talked about the tempo and the duration. Remember that we are going to go back to the beats per minute, so don't worry that much for now. But we are going to take a look, not at the instrument, but we are going to take a look at the vocals of this. And canto per tenore, even though it is usually for a soprano also. So I would like you to notice that we have a bar here that I am going to put here. Remember that each of these vertical lines is a bar, and we said, we go back, and it says, this is how you read it. This is very important. Notice that we have 6 and then we have 8. That way of numbering reads, let me put it here. Yeah, going back to our Excel file, notice for a second, this is how it reads. The number above says how many notes you are expecting to find in a bar. So in the first example, we are expecting to find 3 notes. In the second example, we are expecting to find 6 notes. The question is, what is the base value? In the first one, a 3/4 means that we are expecting to find 3 notes with the value of a quarter. In the second example, we are expecting to read 6 notes with the value of 8. So you say, in the first example again, 3/4 means 3 notes with the value of a quarter, means we are expecting to find 3 of these guys here, because this is a quarter. We are expecting to find 3 of those guys. In the other example, in the 6/8, we are expecting to find 6 guys with the value of 8. So we are expecting to find 6 guys of this value with just one tail. If we go back to the score then, and there we are again, it says that we are expecting to find 6 notes with the value of 1/8. As we start, because it's much easier to read it here, if we go back to the let me hide the Excel. If we go back to the score of this tarantella, we said that we're expecting to find 6. We have, count with me, this one is what? Try to recall. This one is the silence of this one, and these are quarters. But we said that we are aiming at finding eighths. So why do we have value of quarters, the silence, and the sounds when we said we wanted quarters? Because that works much better for what a composer wants to show us. But if I ask you by simple math, how many eighths does a quarter have? Of course, it has 2. So we are going to add 2 silences, 1 here, it is now 3, 2, the value of this one, 5, and this one takes the value of 1, 6. There it is. We have 6 notes with the value of 8. That's why I was telling you that it looks a lot like math. And I know that many people go to music because they detest math, but the truth is that this is how you construct this one. Going back to the sixth, for the moment, don't pay attention to this guy here and these points here, and again this ligatura here, and then this point here. We're going to explain it in 3 or 4 more entries. Counting again, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. There it is, 6 notes of the value of 8. Counting again, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. There it is, 6 of the value of 8. Remember that this is a quarter and it's worth 2, because a quarter is 2 times 1/8. So 2, 3 plus 1 plus 2, 5 plus 1, 6. This little guy here means that it adds half the value. This is a complication that I was not expecting when I looked for this example, so I'm going to have to explain it. Look, let's make it by deduction. We are looking for 6. We have 2 here. We have 2 here. We already have 4. And with this one, we have 5. How many are we missing to get the 6? We are missing 1. And that's why this point here shows when there is this dot in front of a note, then it means that the actual value of these notes, you have to add half of the value that it actually has. I know that it sounds complicated, so I am going to put it on the screen once again, going back to the Excel. what I was saying is a dot in front of the notes adds half of the base value. So the base value of this guy here is a quarter. But if it has a dot, then it has half of the value. What is half of 1/4? It's 1/8. Much easier if you convert it into eighths. So 2/8 here plus 1/8, then it's 3/8. 3/8, it's the actual value of this one. So if we say, going back to this, if we say 2, 3, 2, 3 plus 2, 5 plus 1, 6, there it is. Faster. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Faster. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 2, 4, 5, and it's silence of an eighth, 6. You see? And this is how you build the value of the number of the notes of each of the values. But why don't we listen to that? And so that you can somehow notice, you know about the tempo, which we reviewed earlier, you know about the height of the notes that you can now read because that's what I explained in the first session. And now you are going to listen to the duration of it as we play. Let me see the tarantella. We need to put it here. Look at this. And so this is how this case is a recording by Franco Bonisoli. Real here. Non mancherà 2, 3, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 2, 3, 5, 6. There it is, 6/8. Let's go for another example, a much slower one. We have torna sorrento, and for torna sorrento, we have the value of 3/4, which means we are going to find 3 notes of the value of 4. Our friend here, now, instead of finding eighths, we are going to find fours. We are going to find 3 guys of this value in this score. So we are going to do the same example. Look at this. We have a half, an eighth and an eighth, a fourth. An eighth and an eighth, and another fourth. An eighth and an eighth, we have another 4. There you go. You have 3/4. Now it is different. We have the value of 1, but this guy here, remember that this one is a half. Going back to your math classes, how many values of 4 are there in a half? There are 2. Simple math, right? If there are 2, then where it is, let me close the danza already. Yeah. If this one lasts 2, then it is 1. And we have 3 values of a quarter. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 6/8. That is the same as 3/4. Again, 1 plus 2, 3. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 6 values of 8, which equals 3/4. Go back to your fractions understanding in math. 1 plus 2, 3. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And we have again 2, 2.5, and another half. There you go. You have 3. That's how it works. So let's play that part so that you can identify how it goes. Video mare quanto è bello. Torna sorriento. There we go. couple of notes to wrap up today's episode. In theory, this is very mathematical. So, however, as you could notice, in particular in this one recording of Torna Surriento, the singer always either adds pauses, makes longer pauses, either for reading, either for interpretation purposes, or modifies the duration. As it is the case with Belinda Ramirez singing this aria, you notice that she kept several notes for much longer than written. That is very common. And of course, playing with the rests and with the sounds makes or adds value to the interpretation. That's why I was sharing with you that if the value or the frequency of the note, it is a do, a si bemol, or whatever, it's very objective. This part of the duration of the notes is very subjective because either the orchestra director, the pianist, or the singer himself can add or subtract for either reading or emphasizing a syllable or a sound or an emotion. So even though singers are taught or are trained with this thing called the metronome, just to make sure the video mare quante belle ta 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 ta, so that it goes pa 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 pa. Truth is that when they are actually singing in front of people, things can be very very different. And next week we are having finally the explanation of what BPM means, so get ready because that means we are having again more math. And sorry, but that's part of how music works. Thank you.